Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa. For a chance to catch up on the latest news from across the continent, I'm Jean-Emile Jamin. Coming up on the show, Mali's military rulers have moved to postpone a constitutional referendum which they themselves had scheduled for the 19th of March. However, authorities say they'll maintain the previously agreed timeline to return to civilian rule. Then Senegal's former Prime Minister Cheikh Hadjibou Soumaré was taken into police custody on Thursday after being accused of libel. That's because Soumaré questioned current President Macky Sall about allegedly financing French opposition leader Marine Le Pen. And an airplane carrying tons of European aid has arrived in the beleaguered East Congolese city of Goma. This as M23 rebels and government troops continue to trade fire in the region. Thanks for joining us. Mali's military government has announced it will delay a constitutional referendum scheduled for later this month. It was set to be the first in a series of scheduled polls meant to restore democracy following a coup in 2020. For now, there's been no mention of a new date, while regional bloc ECOWAS is yet to react. Caroline Lambolet tells us more about what this means for the country.
It would have been a key step for the return to civilian rule. But 10 days before the referendum on the constitution was due to take place, the military authorities in Mali announced they would be slightly postponed.
Today, we do not have a date for the referendum. Still, though, I'm very happy to announce that some of the goals we had set have been achieved. We have a draft for the constitution.
More time is needed to get the electoral authority up and running, he said. The draft constitution significantly strengthens the powers of the president, enabling him to appoint and dismiss top officials and dissolve the National Assembly. The military authorities came to power in a coup in 2020. Last summer, they announced a 2-year transition phase they said would take effect from March 2022. Since then, they've promised that presidential elections would be held in February next year. This, following pressure from regional powers to move towards a democratic transition. On Friday, the Malian government spokesperson said that the deadline negotiated with the economic community of West African states would be maintained. There is speculation that interim President Assimi Goïta could run in 2024, despite pressure from ECOWAS against the participation of any leaders from the current military government.
You can say that there's cordial.
ECOWAS had imposed stiff sanctions on Mali after the new authorities failed to honor a previously agreed electoral calendar. Those have since been lifted, but Mali remains suspended from the bloc.
Well, over in the DRC, fierce fighting erupted once again on Friday between M23 rebels and government troops. Both sides traded blows near the eastern town of Goma, where a European flight carrying 35 tons of aid and medical equipment arrived in the afternoon. It's the first mission of its type to arrive in the city, which has been increasingly threatened by fighting. A recent internationally brokered ceasefire was supposed to take effect on Tuesday, but failed, and that prompted a UN Security Council delegation to arrive in the country to assess the situation. Let's get some reaction.
There's a plan for de-escalation that was agreed upon by all African actors, including local leaders. It must have everyone's full support. All those who think they can continue to threaten DR Congo's territorial and economic sovereignty to the detriment of the Congolese people should know that they too could be targeted by sanctions and that the international community is watching.
We cannot remain indifferent. We must show our full and complete solidarity. That's why we're providing this aid, and another plane will arrive next week. There will surely be more to follow. There's also humanitarian aid being mobilized by the European Commission, an initial package of 47 million euros and further financial support to come.
Senegal's former Prime Minister Cheikh Hadjibou Soumaré has been accused of defamation and spreading fake news. And that's after he insinuated that the country's current president, Macky Sall, may have paid 12 million euros to France's far-right leader Marine Le Pen. Soumaré was taken into custody last night and released this morning. A judge will now investigate to see whether he should face trial. France 24 correspondent Sam Bradpiece explains the details from Dakar.
Back in January, Senegalese President Macky Sall met with the French far-right leader Marine Le Pen. The very existence of this meeting wasn't made public until after the event itself, and earlier this week the former Senegalese Prime Minister, Cheikh Hadjibou Soumaré, wrote an open letter to Macky Sall asking him if he had made a donation to a French politician and if this donation had amounted to 12 million euros, the implication being that the politician in question is Marine Le Pen herself. Mr. Soumaré's lawyer told me that earlier this morning his client was formally accused of defamation and spreading fake news, something that the opposition say is further proof of Macky Sall manipulating the justice system to silence critique.
Il faut que ça arrête. Il faut que ça arrête. Il faut que l'État arrête d'utiliser la machine judiciaire pour régler ses comptes personnels.
In recent months, politicians, journalists and even musicians have faced legal proceedings here in Senegal after criticising the Macky Sall administration. Mr. Soumaré will have to wait for an investigating judge to decide whether or not he will have to face trial. As for the question of whether Macky Sall did send any money to Marine Le Pen, well, there doesn't seem to be any evidence for that as of yet.
Time for some more news from across the continent. Hundreds of people from Gambia's opposition party have marched through the capital of Banjul, demanding greater transparency from President Adama Barrow's administration. Leaders of the United Democratic Party also highlighted the high cost of living and a swathe of financial scandals, including COVID-19 funding and a Gambia Ports Authority embezzlement scandal. These are believed to be the first opposition protests allowed in the former dictatorship for nearly 3 decades. Then US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to travel to Ethiopia and Niger next week to discuss the post-Tigray war peace deal and counter-terrorism efforts in the Sahel. His trip will be the third high-profile visit to Africa this year by the Biden administration, and it comes as Washington aims to counter China and Russia's growing influence on the continent. And Tropical Storm Freddy is due to hit the coast of southern Africa yet again early on Saturday. One of the strongest storms ever recorded in the southern hemisphere, Freddy has already killed at least 27 people in Mozambique and Madagascar, displacing thousands. According to the World Meteorological Organization, the storm may have broken the record for the longest lasting tropical cyclone in history. Water pollution has reached toxic levels in several regions across the eastern Ivory Coast. In the town of Ouele, locals from 11 villages have denounced a gold processing company who they say is culpable for the poor water quality in the area. Ivorian officials have now also been deployed to assess the environmental impact and shed light on the issue. Sadia Manjo, Ange Nomenyo and Sophie Lamotte report.
Ouele, in central Ivory Coast, is devastated by water pollution. Lake Baya, cornerstone of the province, is unrecognizable. In the last year, the local river became a thick brown stream. Locals from Ouele and 10 villages in the area blame Somina, a gold company that recently moved to the region.
This waterbed you see here contains fish. But today there are no more fish. There is no more life. This water is dead. There's nothing left. We are the leading producers of food in our region, but this year we had nothing.
The gold company Somina denies any responsibility and hasn't responded to France 24's request for comments. The Ivorian Pollution Control Center collected water samples for analysis in the hopes of identifying the nature and source of the pollution.
If we find chemical elements in the water, there will be an impact on fish resources. The food chain will be contaminated. And as we consume fish, inevitably humans will also be contaminated.
This toxicologist warns that water contaminated with industrial waste could have severe sanitary and environmental impacts.
We will have all kinds of diseases that can become embedded in these areas. For example, mercury or cyanide can cause lung diseases, neurological diseases, or blood diseases. Fish and shellfish will be affected.
Dozens of gold companies are currently operating in Ivory Coast. According to the National Anti-Pollution Center, water contamination is on the rise in areas where gold mining is most intensive.
Well, on the environmental flip side, we leave you with this story where a man in Luzira, Uganda, has found a unique way to recycle plastics by making a large vessel made entirely out of waste and eco-friendly materials. James Katiba hopes his creation, called Floating Island, will encourage recycling and end littering in Lake Victoria.
Bottles get into Lake Victoria from runoff water, like when it rains. Most times, actually, it's runoff water that's not properly managed from the mainland. They end up in the lake, and at times people, just throw them, carelessly. The vessel is it's sitting on a minimum of 10 tons of plastic bottles. It could hold up to about 100 to 120 people in comfort.
It has big island actually, but I never heard anything like this in Africa. Special that you're using the bottles which are collected from the Lake of Victoria. Yes, which is a big plus, because you're not only cleaning the environment, but also you providing something unique.
James Katiba, keep doing your thing. That's it for Eye on Africa. There's more news coming up on France 24.
After Greece, Italy and Hungary, we take you to a very different destination, an archipelago more than 6,000 kilometers away from metropolitan France. This is Guadeloupe, and it's one of the European Union's 9 ultra-peripheral regions, a place of stunning beauty, of paradise beaches, of tourists, but also a place of poverty, where many people can't take access to water for granted. We meet fishermen, entrepreneurs, local business leaders, political leaders, and young people looking to develop new skills and opportunities. Join us for this 34-minute show devoted entirely to Guadeloupe.